Grass fires in North Dakota. The PBS series, All Creatures Great and Small. Farm shows, virtual and real. Planter clinics and sprayer certification and the Grand Farm. That's what's on the docket this week. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. It's Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota. Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls, Minnesota. Dave, we'll start off with a greeting to you and a little coffee talk. How's it going this morning?
Well, not too bad. It's kind of cold out here today, but we still don't have a great deal of snow. A little bit white here and there, but it's been a really awesome winter so far. So
yeah,
hopefully a little cold snap doesn't last too long.
This awesome winter, we worry a little bit about it blending into a dry spring. Now, this morning, right away, I said I had been to a fire this morning just to quickly report on it. And right away you said, well, was it a grass fire? Because that kind of shows the difference between northern Minnesota and North Dakota. Even though we don't have much snow, you have even less. And then grass fires are a consideration out there.
Yeah, there's been some in the southwestern part of the state in the last couple of weeks. Don't know the story behind it exactly, but burned, I believe they said it burned about 20,000 acres in one spot and was getting close to a town and some farms. The farms are pretty sparse out there. So, your chances of being right in the midst of one of those fires isn't very good, but it was threatening a farm. So it's something to consider. We haven't had rain, measurable or decent amount of measurable rain for a long time. Actually, I forget what we were, 7 or 8 inches short of normal last year. And I did look, and we have had 1 inch and 35 of measurable precip since the last rain in, I don't know when that was. July, I guess it was the last time we had a decent rain, middle of July. So it isn't much, and we need some rain. Actually, it was interesting to hear in church they prayed for rain for the upcoming season today, which, is typically something you don't hear this time of year. Everybody's praying for less snow and no rain in the winter for sure, but we're looking forward to getting some rain, because we have to have something for a crop next year.
Well, I think everybody's got a little bit of anticipatory drought anxiety with this little bit of snow that we've had so far. And we had a pretty good rain this fall once, and then after that it was absolutely ideal for harvest. But of course that means we didn't have a tremendous amount of moisture around this area either. So we'll have to hope that we get, if nothing else, get some good timely rains. That becomes the watchword. Soon as you go a little bit short on topsoil moisture, everybody starts talking about timely rains. Hey, let's go on to something else here. Both you and I have been watching the PBS series, All Creatures Great and Small. Now, a little background, of course, James Herriot was the author of the books, All Creatures Great and Small, The Lord God Made Them All, a couple other ones, too. I can't remember the titles off the top of my head, but he became a veterinarian, I think, in 1927 or 28, somewhere in there, worked for Siegfried Farnen. And there was a series of books that he had put out. And, of course, they've been made into television series prior to this. I think there was one in 1978. And then there was one like in the late 90s. But there's a brand new one out on PBS. And there's only been a couple of episodes so far. But, boy, I'll tell you what, it sure brings me back to reading those books, Dave.
Yeah, we've been watching it, too. It's fun to watch. I remember Dad liked the book originally, and talked about that quite a bit. Must have been something I don't know if they read when they were in school,
Yeah.
When he was a kid or not. I'm not sure, but he always talked about that. So, yeah, it's a fun series, and we're going to try and somehow get a look at it again tonight.
Well, I'll tell you what, times like these, it's nice to have something, even though they dealt with their problems back in the 20s too, it seemed to happen a little bit slower and things were allowed to work themselves through a little bit more, as opposed to now where everything has to have an immediate answer and it has to be put out immediately. They worked their way through problems, and I think they took their time to think about things just a little bit more. One thing that's come up so far that I remember from watching or reading the book rather, was the Knacker Man. That's the fellow who picks up all the corpses of dead animals, and they talk about the Knacker Man every once in a while. Of course, we used to have that too when we were younger. We had a fellow who'd come pick up any animals, and I don't know, it doesn't seem like there's as many of those people around anymore, just because there's not as many people who take care of animals.
Yeah, I don't know either. I haven't seen anything like that around here, but I'm guessing there probably still is a way to dispose of cattle like that. I don't know who does it or how, because, like you said, we don't see that truck anymore. And you used to see that truck coming through all the time. You know, they go and pick them up, but I don't know what they call it nowadays, but I know it's not the Knacker Man.
No, it's not. You know, of course, this spring when we had all the COVID-19 problems at meat processing facilities, that kind of bunged up the supply chain, and there ended up being a real call for that sort of thing. One more thing before we go to the break. I have an electric chainsaw. Now, I've used gas chainsaws forever. I don't like the smell. I don't like the heat in the summer, and I don't use them that much, so I don't really need to have a great big chainsaw. So I went with electric this year, and I went with a steel battery-powered chainsaw. Dave, it's so nice. It's easier on my hands. It's, of course, a lot lighter. It's quieter, and it's just immediate. All you do, as long as you have a charged up battery, is you go ahead and plug that battery in there and just pull the trigger and go. You got to put in chain oil, of course, but other than that, it's a pretty straightforward operation. And, you know, for a person who doesn't do a lot of wood cutting, or if this needs to do some trimming or something like that every once in a while, or even a big tree. I had a large tree fall down, and I cut that up. I had to cut the base of it from one side and then the other, but, you know, it really worked out pretty well. There's seems to be a lot more electrical stuff going on, and I think there's a place for it. Maybe not always in some of the places we're trying to make it, but I liked it on my chainsaw.
Well, I like the battery powered stuff too. It's just like the weed eaters and stuff like that. You know, we have I guess it's a Black and Decker weed eater, and then that goes along with a hedge trimmer, Black and Decker hedge trimmer, and then I think Black and Decker has a chainsaw, or I know they have a chainsaw that uses the same batteries as the hedge trimmer and stuff. They're 20-volt batteries, and so they clip 3 of them on there. It's a real thin battery, and so it ends up being a 60-volt unit. And I haven't got one of them yet, but I have thought about it. But I already have a little electric chainsaw that you just plug in.
Kind of nice. I like how quiet they are, and I like how light they are. Dave, let's take a quick break. We'll do my online column. When we come back, we're going to talk about farm shows, virtual and otherwise, planter clinics, and sprayer certification. I'm Grant Nelson. Dave Nelson's in Carrington, North Dakota, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast. I'm Grant Nelson, and this is Rural Reflections. There are sounds and sights I just take for granted. Stimulus such as sight, sound, and smell sometimes fail to get my attention as they become part of the tapestry of life and fail to stand out on their own. One of these senses stepped from the chorus line recently and into the spotlight, brought there by the great common language of music. There's not much stronger emotional language for me than a little music and some good lyrics. I was driving down the road one day, and Red Stagel came on the radio. I used to watch Stagel's show somewhere west of Wall Street. I always liked his music and the way he read poetry. I had never heard his rendition of Somewhere My Love, which was the song on the radio that day. Now, Somewhere My Love started out as Laura's theme from the movie Dr. Zhivago back in 1965. The theme acquired lyrics and became something enjoyed throughout time. I never thought of it as a country western song, but Stagel made it feel that way. I think I listened to the lyrics for the first time that day. I always thought of the song as hopeful, which it is. However, I think it is also about saying goodbye, perhaps due to death. I mean, there is one lyric that says, "Godspeed, my love," which could just be a trip of distance, although it makes me think that it could be the end of one life's journey. I also think the lyric of winter, which would be death, covering the hope of spring, birth, could make it a song of goodbye on a deeper level than just miles. It does express hope that the couple will reunite one day. I just don't know for sure what separates them. The song is upbeat and brought me back in time to somewhere in the 70s, most likely to a rendition of the song by Floyd Kramer or Ray Conniff, which were often sold on television at the time. The melody also creates a diversion while the sad lyrics are delivered to the listener. I thought about those sad lyrics, how they seem to end with hope. I don't know whether it is the hope that two people who are lonely can reunite, or if it's the hope of seeing those we love after death. Either way, it plucked an emotion that made me consider how important it is to remove the distractions that cause us to become self-absorbed and really soak up the short time we have with loved ones. Perhaps it was a realization just waiting to surface in this age of social distancing. However, I think it was a song. By the way, Red Stagel got sick with COVID-19 back at the end of December. I heard last week on the radio that he was doing better. I'm Grant Nelson. This is Rural Reflections. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections podcast. Dave, I noticed that in Marshall County, they are going to have a fair. They're planning on a fair this year. Of course, all these fairs around here and farm shows, whatnot, they all got canceled last summer and last spring due to COVID-19. But we are starting to plan some farm shows. We're hearing about it, and we're hearing about some virtual ones too, aren't we?
Yeah, there's been virtual machinery showings and so on from the manufacturers, and we're going to have some face-to-face things coming up as far as training for our personnel. I don't know how they're going to do sprayer certification. I've seen it's been advertised already because, for dicamba, they have to certify every year, and I don't know. The whole dicamba thing is still kind of up in the air, but anyway, they're starting to loosen up a little bit and getting some face-to-face training. I'm sure it's going to be social distanced and masked and all that, but at least it's a move towards normalcy again.
Seed placement and seed depth and understanding your planters seems to be a big priority now. Well, I guess it always has been a priority, but maybe even more so now. There's planter clinics coming up too, aren't there?
Oh man, yeah. This is the time of year for all of that. There'll be planter clinics. Usually they get into early March when a lot of that stuff is going on, because the farm show thing is late January and early February, and seed companies have to get their thing in, and there's a lot of free meals that have to be had and so on. So planter clinics usually get towards the end of it, or they'll maybe be held in conjunction with a sprayer clinic or something like that. So that's all coming up, and it's kind of going to be nice if we can get back to doing that again.
I remember that. I remember that free lunch season. That's when I worked for Lloyd and Arene. We always went out to see the implement dealers and that sort of thing, because when they had a free lunch somewhere, I had to explain a new grain bin, how it aerated or something like that. That was a big deal. But I agree with you, Dave. It would be nice to get back to that face-to-face thing where we can talk to people and maybe even see some hand gestures or something like that, because it makes a big difference when you're talking to somebody. If you can, you can point to something, or you can inflect a little bit, or maybe it's even a little bit easier to have a little humor between you, so you have a little bit more open conversation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing really replaces that, and some of the people that put those things on are so darn good at it. They make it enjoyable. it is nice to get together and visit people a little bit. It's gotten at the point where, farmers call ahead to see if they can come in, and they, knock and ask if they can come in without a mask or if they need a mask. And so it's time to get back to normal as far as I'm concerned anyway.
Yeah, I'd like to see it myself. One more thing before I let you go. I got to talk. We've talked about this before in the past, but DigiKey now has a video coming up in February on their website, and it's going to have to deal with the Grand Farm an awful lot. Now, the Grand Farm is doing ag research and testing, doing a lot of testing with autonomous equipment, UAS, UAV drone mapping. This past year, they had 5 different crops: soybeans, corn, sugar beets, wheat, and sunflowers. And they also have organizations that they've engaged with, which basically means the organizations have partnered with Grand Farm, and that does take a membership fee. And they're working to find a different, a more autonomous way of farming in many ways, or doing the same thing with technology that might have taken labor and man hours prior. But DigiKey, of course, supplies Grand Farm with some of their technology and some of their equipment. The parts come from DigiKey in Thief River Falls, so they've got a video coming up in February sometime. So I wanted everybody to know about that. But at Grand Farm, that is an interesting organization that's put together, and that's I think just north of Fargo, isn't it?
I believe so. I haven't been there, but they always talk about it at our meetings. I believe Case IH partners with them on some level,
Okay.
And so it's really the future, is most likely going to be much more autonomous.
I think so. I've talked to some people last week, and we were talking. They deal a lot with heavy equipment and that sort of thing. And they say, yeah, we're seeing it, and it's harder to find truck drivers. They're really happy that when they can find somebody who can get into their equipment and do the work, or somebody who's young and wants to dig in and find it. A lot of what they do now is recruitment. They really work hard to get the people who can actually get in there, and if not operate the equipment right away, at least demonstrate a willingness to learn. And it's becoming less of that, at least for this particular profession. And so I think the autonomous has found a niche, and maybe even something larger than a niche, particularly in ag, and I would say probably construction coming up in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think there probably is even some construction, where there's a tedious packing job or something like that, that can be run like that. I mean, they do remote control, and so I'm sure it's in places it's being utilized already. It's just like everybody kind of expects the first thing to see autonomous is going to be an autonomous grain cart,
right?
So they can just call the cart over to them and have it come and dump the combine.
Yeah. Yeah, the eastern North Dakota area, they're doing a lot of this autonomous work, and the work that's going on with drones and that sort of thing, just the system that they will use to fly drones without somebody present at the time. A lot of that technology is being developed really in between Grand Forks and Fargo. So that's kind of an exciting region to be. I think, though, for the farmers, it's the same thing farmers have always wanted to do. Be efficient, do things correctly, only now it's on a larger scale, and there's way more information that they have to handle. Don't you think, Dave?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it right now, is just dealing with all that information. It's good to have it there, but you got to be able to process it, use it, and store it somehow. And I think that's what a lot of it's about. Dave, you got anything else for us this week?
No, I guess not. Hoping for a nice week.
That'd be just fine. It'd be good with me. I'll let you go. That is Dave Nelson out in Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.